Welcome to the Beat Sessions. What are the Beat Sessions? We'll tell you in a minute or two. Welcome to Everything is Everything. Today we're doing a special episode. We've reached episode 50. Yeah, Ajay, congratulations. This
Amazed.
is a great moment, episode 50. And we decided that we're going to do an Ask Me Anything episode because one of the things we're really delighted about is the community that we've built of people who comment on the YouTube page and write to us and so on and so forth. And we felt that let's have a direct conversation. So we asked for, questions on Twitter and elsewhere. We've collated the questions. Ajay has gone through all of the questions. He's sort of organized them, which is why you don't see a laptop in front of me because I don't need notes today. Ajay is going to proctor the questions as it were, and he might have paraphrased some of them to make them crisper. Editing to chalu hai bhai. So, if your question has been, sounds more elegant than it was, this is the man the credit goes to. What should we tackle first?
In the interest of brevity, I've made questions shorter. So I've rewritten and paraphrased questions. And gentle reader, I apologize if the subtlety and the nuance of your original question is lost in this. And we have a lot of questions to go through. So the answers will also be like helicopter tours and not doing justice to the question. Okay, so let's go. Anish Shetty asks, Amit, we're tired of this look. We want new locations.
New location. So that's why we are in Beer. We've come here for a week. We're going to record 10 episodes here, and we are calling these the Beer sessions. Would you explain why, how, and why this idea came about and how we made it happen?
Many things came together. Vaishnav and Namsita were very attached to Beer, which they think is one of the great places of the world, and we agree. We now agree. And I was coming out of my 25th January fracture with a 11th May hiking plan in Himachal Pradesh. So we put all this together that when the hike ends, we will congregate at Beer in Himachal Pradesh and we'll do a bunch of sessions.
Fabulous. And one interesting lesson that you just shared with me has to do with drinking water and the viscosity of blood and the load on the heart and the optimal way to exercise. So kindly share that insight.
Just beautiful knowledge. There is 6 liters of blood in the average human body. When you start exercising, you sweat and you lose water. And you can imagine if you've ever drunk a liter of water after exercise, then losing 1 liter of water as sweat on a base of 6 is reasonable. And that's 16.66%, which is material. So the blood becomes thicker. When the blood is thicker, it is harder for the heart to pump that blood, which is why we feel subjectively more tired in a cardio sense when we do exercise and we have lost water, and which is why drinking water makes us feel better because the blood flows better. Okay, so that's like this interesting direct connection between fluid intake and sweating and exercise capacity. But I thought about it in a different way, that you could use this as a tool for training. So imagine under city conditions in a treadmill where you have a refrigerator filled with water. Imagine if you deliberately train with less water, then that basically amounts to amping up the challenge on your heart. So that could be a way of cardio training to push the capability of your heart.
The Bengali in me is freaking delighted because I'm just thinking that I don't need to go running anymore. I can just stay away from water and walk around gently, and the heart is still working
More
harder.
challenging than
Yeah.
walking around gently when well hydrated.
When well hydrated. So we just want to tell you, gentle listeners, that hydration is important. We are just like kidding around. So, drinking water is super important. Drink enough of it, but not too much. One thing I learned a few years ago when I was into running, and so I started running, and the most I ran was a 10K, though I thought one day I'll do marathons and all, hopefully get back to that. But I, like a geek, I read basically every running book there was, some 30, 40 books over, all the core books over a couple of months. And one of the things I realized is that in marathons, a lot of people die because they're drinking too much. They're being overcautious and drinking too much. So something to watch out for.
Okay, now let's get back to
Let's
the
do
question.
this.
This shall be a low digressions episode, Amit.
Done. We have too
will
many
just
questions.
answer questions.
We have to respect our...
So, Anish Shetty asks me, how does low TFR hurt? What will its consequences for India be? Total fertility rate is the number of children that an average woman would have if she lived her entire life in 2024. So, if the woman was born and died in 2024, and if the age-specific fertility rates applicable at every age were played out in 2024, that's the TFR of 2024. Having young people is truly great for a society. Young people have energy and risk-taking. Young people work. and create dynamism in the society. So when a society ages, you get great European movies, but you also get many social problems. But there's a thought there that the quality of movies in a country is basically proportional to the median age. So when India was a very young country, the quality of the movies was atrocious. And as the country ages, we start getting better movies. Is that a plausible proposition?
It's plausible, and I would just at this point give a mid-episode recommendation, and I suspect many of these might come up. That a filmmaker I truly love is Ingmar Bergman, but often inaccessible for some people. So what I would recommend as the best gateway into Bergman's work is this magnificent film called Wild Strawberries, which is in fact about old age and growing old gracefully, and it's just a wonderful masterpiece. So that's my first recommendation for the day.
So this is part one, that young people bring energy, they bring risk taking, they bring dynamism, they work hard, and while they give us bad movies, they are great for the society. But the second deeper problem is about the state. If the state was just aloof to all this, we'd be okay. But unfortunately, in many countries, governments have gone and built pension systems of a kind where they become bankrupt when the ratios go wrong. So there's a word dependency ratio, which is the number of young people per older person. And in many countries, bad pension system designs have taken place. And as a consequence, when aging comes, the government goes bankrupt. And these are human choices. It doesn't have to be, but things can go wrong. So these are ways in which the TFR matters. And I think in India, we are in a remarkable place that we have free migration between North India and South India. So for a generation or so, the aging South is supported by enormous migration flows from the North. For about a generation, we are protected. When the North gets to aging, there will be a really bad aging problem in the North, because one expects the South will continue to suck in the best people and the talent. So the South and the West versus the North and the East is going to become a qualitatively bigger problem when the North and the East starts aging. So just long-term thinking.
I'll add a pointer and a point. And a pointer is to a Seen and the Unseen episode I had done on pensions with Ajay and Renuka Sane. And we speak about TFR in that as well as pension schemes design. And that's sort of useful. And the pointer and the point is really that you also have to think of migration in this context, as Land Pritchett pointed out in a recent episode. That the finest solution for this is migration, where younger people go into a country which might otherwise be aging, and the dynamism comes in, the entrepreneurship comes in, and everything takes care of itself. So,
Amit, what's the ideal human population that the Earth can sustain?
as many as are possible through consent and in the absence of coercion. Like, we've done a great episode on population. It's a constant bugbear with me that people think overpopulation is a problem. There is no such thing as overpopulation. People are brains, not stomachs. I'd urge you to watch that episode for more, which is why constantly you look at the flows of migration in the world. They are from places of low density to high density, like cities. Why do people come to cities? Cities have the highest population density. They are the most prosperous. They attract the most people. People are voting with their feet. You have to be less condescending and think of people as brains and not stomachs. And that's something I really feel strongly about. So there is no such thing as too many people as far as I'm concerned.
And Anish Shetty asks me, is there something fundamentally wrong with the US economy? Okay, so there are many things to admire about the United States economy. It's an amazing country. They do many things right. If I think of the fundamentally wrong things about the United States today, one part is that they're not in a good fiscal place for precisely the stuff that we talked about a moment ago. When you add up the entitlements in the United States of Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, and you bring those on balance sheet, the United States public finance is under deep stress, and it's not clear how this is going to play out. So the country has really got, the government has got extravagant promises which are going to hurt. And the even bigger problem facing the United States is that in some ways the Civil War was not won, and they have not exorcised the ghosts of racism and populism and conservative social values and the anger of the underclass. So I think there is another generation to go for the United States to find its place and calm. The level of social conflict in the United States is unbelievable, and that is interfering with everything. It is really holding back the country. Okay, next I go to Rishabh Datta. He says to Amit, what do you do for a living?
I'm a professional podcaster as of now, which sort of not too many of us around.
But that's like honorary service to the universe, right? I mean, you're just giving gifts to the universe.
Well, in a sense, but whenever I speak about the creator economy, I speak about how you have to think of what you do in terms of two R's. One is reach and one is revenue. And my podcast gives me reach. And eventually, if you get reach, you build credibility, you get revenue from somewhere. For a while, a substantial source of that was and is the writing course I conduct, The Art of Clear Writing, where I've had some 2,500 students so far. But even there, the cautionary tale is you can't be too cynical and think of it only as revenue. In whatever you do, whether you're doing it for reach or revenue, you have to put your heart and soul. So, early on, people who signed up for the writing course did so only because I had credibility from the podcast and from my blog more than a decade ago. But today, people who sign up because of word of mouth from people who've already done the course. So I think in the end, you do what you love. And I have been lucky enough that I've been doing what I love and have managed to sort of sustain myself with it. So in that sense, it's taken me a long time to get here. It's literally taken decades to get to the point where I can do what I love and I don't have to compromise at all. It's also why I don't write columns for newspapers anymore and so on and so forth.
Hussein says, Amit, can India ever have a universal basic income, universal free public healthcare?
Yeah. My simple answer to that is that my dream for this country and your dream as well, I'm quite sure, is that we get to a stage of prosperity through growth where we don't need a universal basic income, where we don't need the state to provide for anything. We are far from that. So if we just focus on growth, like the 91 reforms over the next 2 decades got hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, where they don't have to think of a UBI, they don't have to think of handouts. So we have to play this delicate balancing game where people are still in dire straits and need help, we have to help them in whatever way we can. But in the long term, you want growth to bring about prosperity. So, these things aren't even required, they're not on the horizon.
And Hussein says, is there a path to a nice republic without universal suffrage? For example, basically rules where voting is restricted to persons that pass a certain test.
I'd be strongly against that. I think that is terrible because, people will often say only educated people should vote. Like that would do any good. I mean, education, as we know, is not a guarantee for great ideas. My point is, the moment you create a bar, somebody decides what that bar is, and people are left out of the process. I think that's a dangerous, patronizing way of thinking. I think India should be proud that when we began with universal suffrage, that, we had women voting, for example, before many of the advanced nations in the world, and we should be proud of that. And long may that stay. There might be many things wrong with our republic, there certainly are, but one of the things we got right, in my opinion, is universal suffrage.
Hussein asks me, Ajay, recommend something that you use which costs less than rupees 10,000. Okay, so I will recommend something I use which costs rupees 300. Okay, and it's a nifty little plastic box which is called a pill case. Okay, so a pill case has 7 little boxes for the days, and each of them has 3 compartments for morning, afternoon, evening. And whether you're taking medicines or you're doing supplements, what you do is you take the cognitive burden of once a week of planning your 1 week of medicines and or supplements, and you fill up that box, and then you're done. You just blindly obey from the box, and the box also remembers that, did I remember to take my lunch doses, and you just glance at it and you see, is the tablet still there or not. So I found it to be a significant help, because otherwise I would miss doses and I would not remember, did I remember to take the medicine or not, and I would make mistakes and it was too much burden. So here I concentrate once a week, I fill out the pill case, and then I'm a zombie, I'm brainlessly just obeying that for a week.
So ideally, dear reader, we want you to be so healthy that you never need pills at all. And for this, it's also important that hydrate properly.
Okay. Next, Suchit Kumar asks something which you can't answer right now, but he says, Amit, You made hundreds of recommendations. Can you please pick me a 10 bookshelf?
It's really hard. And it's really hard because I think, when people will ask me that, okay, how can I learn about the kind of classical liberalism you speak about? And then I think about it and I can think of random books here and there, but where is a primer? Or there is a question to you later, and I'm sure you'll address that how can I learn about India? What is a toolkit to understand India better? And there is really no one book. And perhaps that is a call to action for either of us or both of us to actually get down to writing some of the things that ought to be written. It's hard for me, I think, over the course of the 49 episodes we've done before this, we've given a bunch of recommendations. So I'd kind of go back to them. I'd say Eamon Butler's primers on public choice, on classical liberalism, on Hayek and Friedman are excellent primers on those great thinkers who everyone should read. Seeing Like a State by James C. Scott, which you mentioned in the past, and his other books. I love Orwell's essays. But I think the important thing that I would say is that it is also important to read a lot of fiction, to read novels, to immerse yourself in that world, to watch good cinema, because understanding the world is not just taking in information about the world, but immersing yourselves in the lives of others, in the minds of others, and taking in all of that by osmosis. So I would in fact say that reading 100 books indiscriminately is better than reading 10 selected books. You read as much as you can. Get into the habit of, when you're bored, you don't pick up your phone, you pick up a book. So that's a great habit to have.
I want to add to that. I'm not even convinced anymore that there is an objectively great book. I feel what happens is each of us is a trajectory through time. Okay, no man can cross the same river twice. Like that, we are evolving and growing and changing through time. And what we need is the matching process where the right book shows up at the right time. And I find there are explosive moments where the right book came to me at the right time and I'm just transfixed. And it's not the fault of the book. If it came at the wrong time, it doesn't feel perfect to me, and it's not the fault of the book. So what we should nurture is that matching process. So I feel we have to lightly engage with a large amount of books and sort of keep a database in our head that, yeah, this book is about this book is about that. And then at the right time, we'll get better matches. And then it just feels explosive. It feels like something fundamental happened in your life when the right book comes along at the right time.
Quick follow-up question. The little that I know of you, I know that one of those books for you was Seeing Like a State, which you mentioned before. Can you name 2 or 3 others?
Land Pritchett is my source for Seeing Like a State, and similarly on thinking about government and organizations, he pointed me to a 1938 book which is called The Functions of the Executive, which is a management book. But to me it was a profound batch of knowledge which opened up my thinking on organizations and organizational behavior, and I have been able to apply that kind of intuition both for thinking about firms, which we do a lot about in this show as an example, but also for government organizations. And so that opened up my eyes to thinking about organizations, organizational behavior, what goes wrong in large complex organizations. And it is interesting that both these books came to me from Lant, and now I wonder why. Partly because Lant knows great books, so gentle reader, hang out with people who know great books. But second, I respected Lant. I took his word seriously, so I gave these books a serious chance. So we each of us, we are inundated with influences. We get many people and ideas. And then, for example, once I got to Seeing Like a State, then cut, I went and read everything by James C. Scott. And I think we've mentioned on this show Against the Grain. I consider Against the Grain to be one of the most perfect executions of a book. So if you just want to learn the craft of writing a book, I would say Against the Grain is a great masterpiece, and it really shook my notions about the level of perfection and quality at which a book can and should be written.
Another quick great book, Order by Design by Alain Bertrand. Yeah. You want to learn about cities and urban planning and so on. That's just a masterpiece.
Yeah. Abraham says, Amit, tell us about sleep apnea and CPAP machines.
Okay, interesting question. I didn't expect that, but I would just say that if you snore, I urge you to get tested for sleep apnea. I forget the exact figure, but I think something like 20% of the population has a sleep apnea problem. And the clearest sign of it is that you snore. And it's a dangerous problem. What really happens is that you essentially, and obesity can cause it sometimes, which was an issue I had. And what happens is you kind of stop breathing when there's obstruction and so on. And one result of that is snoring, but another result is that it can be dangerous because you're constantly waking up without realizing it, and during the day you feel tired. So I would urge everyone, first of all, if you even slightly suspect that this is an issue with you or your loved ones, you can transform your quality of life by getting tested for it. Now, I got tested for it once. I had a marginal this thing of sleep apnea, but I started using a CPAP machine, and this is again unexpected second order effects. It transformed my life, but not in the expected way, because I didn't, lack of sleep wasn't really an issue for me. All my life I've had an acid reflux problem. So for many years, I would wake up in the morning with either a cold or a sore throat. And after a while, I realized it's because of acid reflux and nothing really worked, and it's a chronic thing. And using the CPAP machine for the sleep apnea actually changed that, because the air that is gushing into your lungs, especially if you use a nasal mask, prevents the acid from coming up. And since then, I have never, woken up with a cold or a sore throat because of that, while that was an everyday thing. So in this very unexpected way, it kind of transformed my life. So I think of it as transformative for that reason. I don't really know what to make of it. I can't say if you have acid reflux, you should get a CPAP machine, but sleep apnea is a genuine problem, so watch out for it.
Rag says to me, why did India lose out to Bangladesh in the garment industry? I think that in India we have a employment rate of about 35%, which means that 65% of the persons of working age are not working. And this is amongst the worst situations you can find of this nature anywhere in the world. Now, basic economics. So you have a lot of people who are not working, and their labor supply should lead to a crash in prices, and wages should go down dramatically. But we have a whole structure of interventions by the Indian state where there are high minimum wage laws, and there is an array of labor law restrictions which make it dangerous and difficult for firms to hire large workforces. So India has a self-inflicted wound of an artificially low working population, an artificially small economy, because the Indian state has damaged the ability of the labor market to function. And Bangladesh basically avoided all these problems. So the wage in Bangladesh is lower than the wage in India. So the employment rate in Bangladesh is higher than the employment rate in West Bengal. And Bangladesh does better, and garment exporting is a low-end labor-intensive thing. So it was India's game to lose, and it is the Indian state which damaged garment exporting from India.
And just to clarify a sort of a basic economic point there, and I'll link to a video by Milton Friedman where he talks about the minimum wage, is that if you set a minimum wage at 15,000 rupees, say, what you're effectively doing is that you are putting everybody below whose wages would be worth or valued at less than 15,000, you're putting them out of a job. You're hurting the poorest of the poor. They would have had a job at maybe 12,000. Now they don't have a job at all. So it's effectively rupees zero, which is tragic. And we have a panoply of labor laws which, are so difficult to comply with that companies just say कि हम hire ही नहीं करेंगे, contract labor use करेंगे when necessary, which is why a lot of firms are stuck at a small to medium size and can never scale and become big. And all of these end up hurting the workers they are supposed to protect.
The worker in West Bengal has a minimum wage of 13,000. The worker in Bangladesh has a wage of 8,000. And in West Bengal, if you build a business, you will have to deal with all kinds of trade union complexities. So very few firms choose to build a garment manufacturing firm in West Bengal. But in East Bengal, they have a minimum wage of 8,000. So people get jobs. And Bangladesh has escaped the extremities of populism in India. There is a more harmonious relation. They've built a political settlement which is conducive to firms and to growth. So firms from all over the world go to Bangladesh and build factories. Okay. Azdab says, Amit, how do I build a writing career in India doing long form journalism?
It's actually hard because we don't have outlets like the New Yorker or the Atlantic, which allow that kind of long form journalism. And where they are, they simply aren't high quality enough. So there isn't that sort of culture there. One of the problems with our journalism is that, the incentives are such that reporters in most newspapers will have to churn out multiple stories a day. There's always pressure. You can't get deep into anything. Beat reporters have vanished. You no longer have like an urban crime beat or etc. etc. Those beats have vanished, and all journalists are being forced to become generalists, which means, in the words of my good friend Prem Panikar, with whom I once did a memorable episode of The Seen and the Unseen, where he said this: all journalism ends up being a mile wide and an inch deep. Now, I'm guessing that the questioner wants to do deep writing, deep journalism, and I'm afraid that as you learn the craft, you have to think of some of it as a labor of love. Now, again, I did many things which were a labor of love, which there was no market for once upon a time. At the same time, perhaps you don't have the luck to be able to do that, and you actually have to earn a living. So I just say that, keep reading a lot, keep writing for yourself. There may not always be a publication. And certainly, I would say that start a newsletter. In fact, this is general writing advice that I would quickly give to everyone, is that in the 1990s, you used to think that, if I'm going to sort of write a piece. I send it to the Indian Express, I send it to Times of India, they publish it. The danger there is that it becomes diffused. You end up writing only when somebody will publish something, frequency goes down, there isn't enough iteration happening for you to achieve excellence. You are restricted by format in terms of word counts, you're restricted by news cycle, etc., etc. And most importantly, people who like your writing, they are diffused, it's all over the place. You can't build a community of your readers. But if you start a newsletter, you start publishing there. Every time somebody likes a piece by you, they subscribe to it. That email database belongs to you, not to a Substack or to any other newsletter site. And you're building a community of your fans. So I would say start doing that. It helps in two ways. One, you build an organic community of your fans. But two, you end up writing more and more. You're not restricted by format or news cycles. You can do interesting things, and that's how you grow. So that's my difficult answer. There are no easy answers. I can't say कि इनको लिखो ये करेंगे. इंडिया में वो है ही नहीं. Maybe you can be one of the people who can do good writing like that and build a culture and build a market for it. But otherwise, it isn't there right now.
Rohit D says, Ajay, how do we think about sustainability and biodiversity? Should we live a simple life? Is degrowth an attractive option? So I think that for a country at the poverty levels of India, degrowth is just morally wrong. Okay, it is an absolute imperative in India to grow GDP by 5x and 10x. Okay, so a very important fact all of us should keep in our foreground is that PPP adjusted per capita GDP in India is about a tenth of what it is in the United States, and there's no reason to be that. So we should put degrowth off the table. How do we think about sustainability and biodiversity? I think that these fit within the frameworks of market failure. Okay, so as an example, emitting carbon dioxide imposes a negative externality. It is global bad, and carbon emissions should be taxed. So the whole toolkit of market failure works. That fundamentally a dynamic private economy delivers the goods subject to the limitations of market failure. Okay, so biodiversity has positive externalities. There is a private benefit when a man destroys 10 acres of forest, but there is a gain to society when that forest is allowed to be there. And so the usual toolkit of how to think about market failure and state intervention. So should you lead a simple life? Okay, so I think all of us should lead a simple life because it's a better place to be. I mean, that's a separate debate. I feel we are happier when we lead a simple life, but also like in recognition of the failures of the state and particularly the Indian state. For example, I just don't like creating trash because I now know how badly trash is handled in Bombay. So our good friend Soumya Roy has this amazing book about the trash mountains of Bombay, and it's a mess what is being done there, and plastic in waste turns into microplastic in the ground, and fragments of microplastic are going into our stomachs where the acid is reacting with plastic and creating truly toxic chemicals inside our stomachs, and this is just a terrible state to be. So I do think that it would be nice to live with less plastic. And for example, it leads to many tangible solutions, which is you should buy milk in a plastic pouch rather than milk in a Tetra pack. Because for that same 1 liter of milk, you have less grams of plastic in the packaging. So I feel that given state failure, given the mess that we have in the world, either on issues like plastic and solid waste management or carbon dioxide or the destruction of forests and biodiversity. So I feel that, yeah, we each of us should try to care and adapt our life, even though we are a drop in the ocean. It just, I do feel that sense of discomfort and disquiet. So, for some time I was buying those nice Amul Tetra packs of protein drinks. And after the 10th of these Tetra packs, I just started feeling bad that so much plastic for stupid 200 ml of the drink. So then I switched to protein powders instead. Okay,
So I want to add to that by pointing you guys to our episode on luxury beliefs. Degrowth is a classic luxury belief which the rich can hold conveniently from the air-conditioned rooms. It hurts the poor. So I agree with Ajay that it is sort of morally wrong to speak about degrowth, especially in an Indian context. And my second recommendation would be the works of Bjorn Lomborg. And one funda I learned from a great book by Lomborg, which came out more than 20 years ago, called The Skeptical Environmentalist, was when he traced the arc of all the great Western cities. And I remember particularly him pointing out that London at one point 100 years ago was deeply polluted, unhealthy. It was a mess, a terrible place to live in. But what happens is that as countries grow more prosperous, those environmental issues begin to sort themselves out because citizens like us become more aware and start living in different ways. And I think sustainability and growth can go together. In fact, growth helps sustainability. And, it's often a false dichotomy that people make between markets and the environment. If you look at the Western world, you'll see that the trajectory is like a bell curve where they'll get very polluted and things seem to be going out of whack. But then as they go prosperous, things kind of get much better.
Vikas M says, Ajay, are there countries which can be templates for a future Indian education system? I would say that there is no real Indian template. May I request you to see our decentralization episode? What would make sense as an K-12 education system in Kerala would be very different from Himachal, would be very different from UP. So there is no India, there are states, and each state is on a different place, on a different journey, and will do things their own way. I think India is unique in the way large parts of the Indian population have walked out on the state system. So really it's a private led system, and the job of the state is to equitably send public money through a voucher system. So there is something very mean and unfair that thousands of rupees are lavished as per pupil expense for the kids that go to public school, and where the parents choose to go to a private school, there is no public money going to them, and that is just mean and unfair. And it's better to have the funding follow the child.
What I'll also say is we have an episode on this coming up shortly. It's going to be one of the episodes of the Beer Sessions. So we'll talk about this in much more length over there.
Aman Seth says, Ajay, could we have got to the modern world economy without the concept of money and ownership? I think no and no. I think barter economies are extremely inefficient. Money is magical. So money solves the problem of double coincidence of wants. And you need money to organize a modern complex economy, particularly on the scales like international trade. That I'm buying something from a Japanese guy, it would be so hard to figure out the double coincidence of wants. Similarly, ownership. No, I don't think it is possible to get to the modern economy without ownership. Varun says, Ajay, you want a price system for everything, but you accept the short rate of the yield curve that is controlled by the central bank. Why is that? Okay.
I don't even know what this means, but
in the interest rate market, the short-term interest rate on government bonds is controlled by the RBI. It is a price that is determined by the central bank. And we make no bones about it. That one price is set by the central bank. Okay. And my answer is, let's go back one up. In the creation of fiat money, the algorithm for how fiat money is put into the world involves this one number, that the central bank has to fix this one number. So it is integral to the production of fiat money. Now, it is possible to have cryptocurrencies, which are a pathway to get to money without involving a state organization. we take that concept seriously. It's an important new idea that has come up in the last 20 years. And in the next 20 years, we think it's going to become more important. But if you need money, then money is made by a central bank in the traditional worldview. And the only recipe we know to make money involves the central bank picking a number for the interest rate at the short end. Okay, next, there is a gentleman who calls himself or herself No One. Okay, No One says, Amit and Nomsita, is AI being used in editing and producing the show? What's your tool chain? What tools are you using today?
Nomsita don't need no AI. Nomsita uses Premiere Pro because that's what she's most familiar with and incredibly good with and fast with. And that has the software it does. And I'm assuming it incorporates a bunch of AI in different ways. These software just get better and better. They're absolutely magical in the way that today we can just use them on our own laptops and you don't have to be a professionally trained editor splicing film to do all of that. So tech is magic. But no, beyond what Premiere Pro has, we're not really using anything, and that'll just get better and better.
Okay. Anshul Khare says, Amit, when do we get to see the portions of EIE episodes that were edited out?
So, Anshul, here's the thing, people, when I do seen unseen episodes of 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours, people often ask that, is there anything that you cut out? And the truth is, my ethic for the seen and the unseen always was that you keep the full organic conversation, you cut nothing out. Similarly, for everything is everything, what we decided is that we just want to be authentic to ourselves. We're going to talk like friends, like in a sense, this is the closest thing you get to a real conversation that we might be happening. It's a little structured in that we know what we're talking about and we generally know what the chapters will be, but digressions are still encouraged within reasonable bounds. So there isn't actually much in terms of outtakes, but we have two very mischievous people who work with us behind the scenes who keep putting together BTS stuff. So maybe someday we'll, have a little more BTS, but there isn't really much that's being edited out per se.
Just fumbles, obvious mistakes are being edited out. For the rest, you're getting the whole truth and the unvarnished truth.
Like Ajay often forgets my name and all of that. So yeah.
Okay, then No One says, Amit, what are your favorite podcasts?
What are my favorite podcasts? Hardcore.
No, first No One says, how do you eat mangoes? No, cut that. Amit, how do you eat mangoes? No, cut that. What are your favorite podcasts?
Okay, is this a serious question?
Yeah.
What are my favorite podcasts? Hardcore History by Dan Carlin is quite amazing. Among, if you're looking at the art of conversation, Sam Harris's podcast is great. I think it's behind a paywall right now, but in the early days, I would listen to that, and I love the flow and the rhythm of that. Among Indian podcasts, I love our friend Shruti Rajgopalan's Ideas of India. I think that's great. She does an incredible job. Milan Vaishnav has a great podcast, A Great Tamasha. He's been very active recently with the elections and all that. And in fact, he's going to come on the Seen and the Unseen a while after this. And he's a fine thinker, a great mind, written a fantastic book as well on crime in Indian politics, which is a must read. So I enjoy his podcast. I must honestly confess that I don't actually listen to as many podcasts as I should. I kind of used to once. Russ Roberts is another favorite of mine, and he's in fact appeared on the Seen and the Unseen, where we spoke about conversation and what we have learned about it. So that was a great episode. So these are my tastes, but I would really say that when I do my writing course, people say, what are your favorite books, what are the books you recommend? And I say, look, there's nothing special about my taste. Whatever you love, do more of it, immerse yourself in that more deeply.
Jasmine says, Ajay, why does it take so long to build infrastructure in India? Okay, it takes long to build infrastructure in any civilized country.
China builds it very fast, some might say.
An uncivilized country. So in any civilized country, it takes time to build infrastructure because you need discussion and debate around various trade-offs. And one person wants a highway to run like this, another person does not want a highway that ruins her favorite park. These are healthy and legitimate debates.
I think where this question is coming from is that Jasmine, being a Bombay resident, is possibly thinking about how for years and years the construction of the metro disrupted life for so many people and made commutes
let's go
much
through
harder.
pieces. So part one is the very decision-making process takes time with public debate and consultation, as it should. Then there is a problem of land acquisition, which will always be complicated, and that's a good thing. Okay, no state should be able to casually acquire land and force private people out of land. And putting in due process and challenge in court, etc., is a good thing. Then you come to the actual project design and the project implementation. There are two kinds of incompetence here. There is the incompetence of government in contract management, and there is incompetence of private construction companies. Government's contracts, contract management, this is a huge choke point in Indian state capacity, in Indian state capability, and this is clearly something governments need to learn to do better. So, how to do the market survey, how to do the bid preparation, how to handle contract disputes, how to change the project design incrementally. These are all things that the Indian state does very poorly, and that inevitably generates delays and mistakes and litigation and so on. On the private construction company side, in all fairness, Indian construction companies have gotten better. Project management has gotten better. Okay, so you and I are old enough to remember that building a normal residential building in Bombay used to take 5 years and 10 years, and these days in 2 years they get the job done. So engineering project management efficiencies in India have gone up, and that's a part of the learning curve and the journey. So to riff on our Everything is Everything episode on firms and internationalization, when you see L&T competing globally and building the airport in Abu Dhabi, it gives you greater confidence that L&T actually has good project management capabilities, and they are swift and efficient in how they build an airport. Okay, Bhavesh says, Ajay, tell us your evolution of learning programming languages. Will you build a show on Julia? My evolution in programming languages, I started out as an undergraduate student in IIT. I learned Fortran, then I learned Pascal, then I switched to Unix. I learned awk, I learned C, I learned Perl. I learned a couple of other things along the way. Then around data and systems that are used for data analysis, I started out with a mix of awk and shell programs. I also know Stata, though I never really used Stata too much. And I learned R. I was an early adopter in 2002, when I was at the Ministry of Finance. I switched my everything to R. I moved all my data analysis work to R, and now I'm in the process of moving to Julia. Will there be an EIE episode on Julia? Probably not. I think it's too niche for the EIE community. But where do you live? Are you in Bombay? Even if you are not in Bombay, in my research community, we are active in the India Julia community. We are building a bunch of open source packages. We do run some amount of Bombay Julia meetups. Okay, so do get in touch, and we're happy to get engaged in other ways. Bhavesh says to you, Amit, how do you manage work-life balance? How do you stay focused in a seen and the unseen conversation for many hours?
So actually, the work that I do doesn't take up so much of my time. And again, I'm like really fortunate. It's taken me many years to get here. But what I do with the seen and the unseen often is that I'll bank episodes. So I'll go to Delhi, I'll record 8 episodes in 9 days. I'll go to Bangalore, I'll do a similar thing. Then I have a few weeks free. And in terms of research, I do heavy research for each episode, but I can read really fast. And like my superpower is I can take in information, process it really fast. But the flip side of that is that I forget it very fast also. But I use Rome research for sort of taking notes and everything. Linking here a productivity episode that we had done where I actually showed screenshots of how I'm using Rome and so on and so forth. As far as work-life balance is concerned, therefore, I have a lot of free time, and work-life balance is not a problem. And my real issue is that I waste too much time where I'm trying to work, but I'll get distracted and I'll play online chess for hours, bullet games, and we have a forthcoming episode on chess also, by the way. And so that is sort of my great lament, that I don't have a balance issue. It is just that in the hours that I try to devote to work, I don't manage to get enough done, which is frustrating for me. And it might seem that seen and the unseen is weekly, everything is weekly. But when you kind of bank it, like here in a week, we are recording 10 episodes of Everything is Everything, you do build these swaths of free time which you should use. So my great frustration is that I haven't been able to use it efficiently enough to do what I really want to do, which is write. But this year I've been working a little bit hard on that. And one quick hack I have is that when I want to work, even though I've built an awesome home office, which I absolutely love, and everything is in place, a tech, the stand desk, everything, I will still end up going to Starbucks and spending a few hours working there, simply because at home I find myself getting distracted. And if you actually go to Starbucks and you're sitting with a laptop, you feel a little sheepish about, oh, playing chess for an hour. You actually feel like, okay, I've come here to work. I actually have to get some work done. So I've struggled with this, and just because I do these two things really well doesn't mean that I've sorted everything out. I struggle as much as you do. It's an ongoing battle with discipline and our own minds.
How do you stay focused for multiple hours when recording the seen and the unseen?
I think you need to make sure that you get enough sleep beforehand. Though frankly, I shouldn't be saying that because I really don't. When I'm doing 8 episodes in 9 days, it's really, there's not much sleep there. And for sleep apnea, there is a medication that is often prescribed called modafinil, which is a cognitive drug, which I take, and which is fantastic. It helps me focus. People talk about, and again, I'd say that it's a prescription drug is used for sleep apnea, which I have, so I can use it. So, take due caution. But I read every research paper on it before I started using it, and I think it is just a mind-blowing cognitive tool. Many people I know use it reliably. It is not habit-forming. There are no side effects. And the delightful thing is, it's not a blunt tool like coffee. Like coffee, you'll have coffee, you'll feel a little alert, then you'll have a crash. You might have acidity if you have too much coffee. All of those things happen. With modafinil, what happens is that even if I'm physically incredibly tired, my mind is completely sharp, and it helps me focus. So quite frankly, it's been of great use to me. And the other important tool is being on a keto diet, cutting down on carbs, because I find that when I'm on keto, or on days when I take modafinil, I don't take it every day, my ELO rating on chess.com goes up by 100 points, and when I come off, it comes down by 100 points. And that's reflective because these days I'm not trying to improve in chess at all. It's just an addiction. I'll just play bullet game after bullet game. There's no improvement. I'm at the same level. So it is actually an interesting measure. So get your diet right, eat healthy. I'm not saying go on keto or whatever, but intermittent fasting plus low carb is just great for lifestyle and longevity anyway. You can watch our episode on diabetes for more of my fundas on that. So that's my short answer.
Okay, now I have a group of questions which are to both. So I'm going to read multiple questions, and then you get to respond in 2 paragraphs, and I get to respond in 1 paragraph. Okay, so Manraj says, how do you go about building the toolkit to learn and analyze the world? Tushar S says, how do I learn, achieve breadth, successfully recollect the things that I have read in the past? Shubham Shreyas says, how do I build knowledge across a vast breadth of knowledge like you? Qazi Mustaqim says, how do you know so much? How do I gain knowledge on the scale of your knowledge? Meher says, tell us about how thinking from first principles works and how this helps. Okay, you first.
I'd say the greatest challenge is to cut off distractions from your life. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to be on the phone all the time. So what I have done now on my phone is my phone, which is I use a Samsung S23 Ultra, but I'm sure many phones have it, or there can be apps which will do this. I restrict the amount of time I spend on Twitter. So if I do more than half an hour on Twitter or more than half an hour on Insta every day, though I'm passive on Insta, I don't have an account. But what then happens is that the phone won't let me access it anymore. The icon goes gray. So figure out hacks by which you don't get distracted so much. I think of it like this, that when you are swiping, scrolling, you're in a shallow state of mind, and you stay on the surface of things, and you have to allow yourself to get deep by immersing yourself into something. So when you're bored, you want to pick up a book, you don't want to pick up your phone, and so on. Now, how you do this is up to you. Maybe set certain hours of the day. Say that first 3 hours of the day, I won't look at my phone, before it's time for work, and etc., etc. But you got to figure those protocols out, and then the important thing is to read a lot. And and when I read these days, I try to take notes. If anything strikes me, I'll highlight it. Often I'm reading for work, so I have copious notes on Rome research. So I try to read, I try to synthesize. On Twitter, I take a lot of bookmarks, because Twitter, while it can be toxic and shallow, you also get an opportunity to follow the best minds in the world thinking aloud for your benefit. So I take a lot of bookmarks, I organize them in folders, I revisit those bookmarks later. So it takes purposive hard work and intentionality to actually get to know more about the world. You have to build a reading habit. it. You have to figure out, how you want to spend your time. And the important thing to remember here also is everything that you do today affects your future self. You play Candy Crush for an hour, your future self is stupider than they would otherwise be. And you read a book for an hour, you are making your future self smarter. So it's an investment in yourself, and you have to, but it's easy to say that. I'm sure intellectually you agree with me, but it takes willpower, and willpower is also a muscle. The more you exercise willpower, the better you get at it. So that's what I'll really say. It has to be purposive, there has to be intentionality, and you have to build a reading habit, because how else can you, expand your knowledge of the world?
I share all those things. Here are a few more that I would like to bring on the table. The first is that the crush of mass culture consumes the time and life and space for most people. So cricket and Bollywood and TV shows is just eating up the day, and then that leaves less space for everything else. So I feel that one has to self-consciously distance oneself from mass culture. That, self-consciously ask yourself to live in the world of high culture, and that's a better place to be. The second thing is that in addition to all the things that you said, I would also emphasize the role of community. It's about our people. Our 5, 15, 50 people are really disproportionately important, because our conversations with our people, our engagement with our people, our sense of connection with the people really fuels the journey of knowledge. The third thing that I feel is particularly important is, I think the puzzle is of purpose. If you do this as a career, if you do this as an objective that I want to get a job, I want to become famous, I want to become successful, then lo and behold, you will become famous, you will become successful. And then what? Because life is too long to run on such, middle level goals. So purpose is the ultimate superpower, and you've got to ask yourself, why am I here? Why is this important? And taking interest in the world and building knowledge about the world is really, an ultimate purpose. And that segues into an interdisciplinary approach. By default, we are brought up to be specialists. Okay, you are brought up to be a cardiac surgeon. Then your interest in life is, how do I do surgery of the human heart? And in everything else, you are dull and uninterested. But that doesn't take you on a journey to knowledge. Whereas once you take interest in the world, then suddenly everything is relevant. History is relevant, sociology is relevant, people are relevant, emotions are relevant, news is relevant. Okay, everything is relevant, and it comes together as one great picture that is building in your mind on recollecting things, and on both having the curiosity and the thirst to pick up one more block of knowledge, and also recollecting things. The human mind works by storing connections to everything. So when everything is connected to everything, you have a higher chance of recollect, and then the pieces come together. Otherwise, it feels like I'm reading a book, and 6 months later it did not leave an impression. So it's very hard for any of us to make a big leap and go off into a completely new field. But we go by adjacencies. That let's learn the next thing, let's learn the adjacent thing, and we are making better sense of the great tapestry of knowledge.
Wise words, and I want to add 2 points and a pointer. And point number one is that there is a great quote by Bob Dylan: if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. And to me, this is about that engagement, that if you're a heart surgeon and you've learned your surgery, you're a specialist, but you're not interested in anything else, you're not really involved in the world except in a shallow way, then you're busy dying. Busy being born is you engage with the world, you take it in every day, there is excitement and discovery. The second point I want to also make is about the goals that we have. Like yesterday, you and I and Vaishnav and Namsita and a couple of our friends were sitting in a cafe in Beer, and I asked the question that, when is it that you are most happy? And I loved everybody's answer. One person said that I'm most happy when I'm in the mountains. Another girl said that I'm most happy when I'm with my dog. And the thing about all our answers were, and you said that you're most happy when you have a new idea, and that excitement makes you happy. And what struck me about that is that all of us said things that are easily achievable. It is easy for you to be with your dog. It is easy for you to be in the mountains if you really love it. It's easy for you to just sit and think about stuff. And I think that that's a great way to define happiness. And people often make the mistake of defining happiness in terms of grand goals. ये achieve करना है, career में ये करना है, वो करना है. And I think those are dangerous, those are elusive, and even if you get there, you will never be happy because it's too goal oriented rather than process oriented, being in the moment, enjoying what you enjoy. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And after these 2 points, my one pointer is to our declutter episode, episode 30, where we spoke about a lot of our personal philosophy about life.
Your namesake Amit Sharma says, Amit, why does the show do nothing on contemporary Indian politics?
So it's actually a conscious decision. The reason for that is that talking about politics, one it becomes dated really fast. We wanted to do timeless content. We wanted to speak about ideas. We wanted to speak about concepts and frameworks and all of that. When you talk about politics, the discourse, firstly, the discourse outside is polarized and can get incredibly simplistic, and we don't really want to go there. And two, in a sense, indirectly, everything we say is about politics. If I introduce you to a framework about how this is how you look at the economy, this is how you look at poverty, you can use that framework to critique different political parties, not one party or the other, perhaps all of them, perhaps none of them. So I think that is more important rather than get specific. Now we understand that if we want to do clickbaity stuff, if we want a large audience, politics dal do, numbers aa jayenge. We don't care about the numbers. We want to have the kind of conversations we want to have. So that's why we've kind of stuck away from that. We don't want to get into that ugliness, but we have strong opinions and we state them through ideas and frameworks.
Rohit Chandra says, Amit, how important is caste in shaping success in modern India?
Unfortunately, and it's quite heartbreaking that it is sadly still a factor. Our society is deeply unequal, and the problem goes deeper than most people realize. I'll give another mid-episode recommendation here of Tony Joseph's great book, Early Indians, and I did a great episode with him as well. And one of the things I learned there is something that is summed up in a great quote by David Reich. David Reich wrote this book called Who We Are and How We Got Here, and he has this great quote that if you're looking for a large population, don't look at India. If you're looking for a large population, look at the Han Chinese. But India is really a collection of thousands of small populations. Now, what does he mean by that? What he's referring to is something that happened around 2000 years ago. Now, in the couple of thousand years before that, migrants came from everywhere, but they were essentially partying. There was intermingling, everything was great. What happened a couple of thousand years ago, and Tony talks about this eloquently in his book and his episode with me, is that a particular ideological strand from the Gangetic Belt won out, and you began to have caste endogamy enforced. And it is that caste endogamy that you only marry within your caste or subcaste that has continued for all these centuries, and which is why Reich calls us a collection of many small populations. That is deeply tragic in a variety of ways. Just in a purely economic sense, Ajay and I keep talking about the importance of large networks and the importance of mobility within these networks if you want to achieve prosperity in every dimension. And that, has been constrained by this. There are health issues. If you, if you keep marrying within a small group, there are health issues. There are interesting diseases in India which don't exist anywhere else, as my medical scientist friends tell me. So there are all of these terrible issues, and it is a problem that might be invisible to many of us who are fortunate enough to be born on the right side of on the lucky side of the barrier, as it were. But it's a reality in India, and it is driving us back. And it's something we must confront and accept. And it is also, unfortunately, going to take a long time to sort of sort it out. Now, when I did a great episode with the Dalit scholar Chandrabhan Prasad on the seen and the unseen, and his point was that his two heroes are Baba Saheb Ambedkar and Adam Smith. Chandrabhan ji said, and I agree with him, that the great driving force that can lift people from their circumstances is the power of voluntary action and markets. People come to cities to be part of larger economic networks, and when you have competition, when you're competing for labor, when you're competing for markets, the cost of discrimination becomes higher. right? And I think that over a long term, that those forces are already playing themselves out a little bit in cities and will continue to play themselves out. So again, it is no panacea. This is a deep cancer within our society and will take a long time to eradicate. But the way that I see it happening is through empowering as many people as you can, and I think economic growth does that. The reforms of 1991 got hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, obviously a substantial number of them from the lower castes who managed to escape many of the bounds that were earlier placed on them. So I think that that's a great way of thinking about it. You can have top down solutions like reservations, for example, and I'm neither for or against them. I don't think they actually make much of a difference in the margins. Thomas Sowell has a great book called Affirmative Action Around the World, which just looks at did they really help who they were supposed to help. I think growth helps much more. You lift people out of poverty so they are not dependent on others, networks increase, and you make it costly to discriminate so people stop discriminating in their own self-interest. But that is prescriptive. In a descriptive sense, I empathize with this question, and with a heavy heart I have to say that we are a long way from there, and unfortunately caste is a factor, and we should all try in whatever way we can to get past it.
Shreyas says, Ajay, give me thoughts on how to learn India. Can you publish a step-by-step guide? For example, he supplies a URL of a step-by-step guide in a certain computer system. Learning India is not like learning physics. Okay? So there is no book of love, there is no book of India where you master that book and then you know India. It is an infinitely rich landscape of knowledge, and it contains history. So it's a moving tapestry, and we have to learn it. So my first thought is that look around you, look out of your window. India is there. Okay, so every day through keen observation, we can learn India, and we should learn India. So one of the most important sources is observation, that every day you are embedded in your source material, and look at it in an intellectual way, and you are gaining knowledge all the time. Watch the changing gender composition of flights, how it varies by the time of the day. Okay, things like that. Just keep watching and keep thinking, keep wondering, why might this be? So intellectualize about what you see rather than experiencing the day in a state of deadness. In the book In Service of the Republic by Vijay Kelkar and Ajay Shah, in the second edition, we responded to a lot of requests by building out the endnotes. So each of those 45 chapters is backed by a reading list at the end of the book, and I think that's a very good jumping off
This
point
is a
for
new
them.
edition,
This is the second edition, the
yeah.
paperback. Okay. Next, Rishabh Mishra says, Ajay, can the problems of modern capitalism be eradicated? Low wages, poor working conditions, and harming the environment. And my answer is these are three different things, and they require you to think in different ways. Low wages, this is just economic growth, that hang in there and build a society that is able to sustain high growth, and just get out of the anti-growth ways. For example, a moment ago we spoke about India and Bangladesh and how we have damaged the cause of garment manufacturing in India by trying to help low-wage people. Okay, so these things are just outright harmful. Similarly, poor working conditions, a lot of that is just about the resourcing. You get to growth, conditions will get better. The poorest factories are hot inside. Then you become a richer country and the firm puts fans into the factory, and you become a richer country and the factory becomes air conditioned. Okay, so this is the journey of economic growth. You've got to fix this. Harming the environment, on the other hand, is about market failure, that you put pollutants into the environment, they harm other people, that's an externality, that's a market failure, and then you need to either come to Gaussian bargains or state coercion, and that needs to be solved. So that's different. These problems are not homogeneous. Okay, Nivid Desai says, tell us about words, state organizations versus institutions. Okay, so I think the word institution is bandied about too often loosely. It's actually an aspiration, it's not a reality. An institution is an impersonal capability, that people come and people go, but the institution works in a predictable and consistent way. the term takes you closer to the words rule of law. People come and people go, but you're treated in a predictable, consistent way, and that is an institution. And I think we do wrong in India, where we are a very backward country, and the word institution is bandied about. So, is the behavior of many Indian state organizations predictable and consistent regardless of the people who man the shop? No, it isn't. These are personalized organizations. So, see the word organization versus institution. So, the word institution should be used with caution. You are an institution when the organization works in a predictable and consistent manner across many leadership changes. For example, I think Hindustan Lever is an institution. It has a regular cycling of the top 10 persons in the organization. CEOs come and CEOs go, but Hindustan Lever has a predictable behavior about it, and that is an institution. So, that's the word institution. It should be used with caution. It should be treated as an aspiration that in order for RBI to emerge as an institution, we needed to bring about the legal changes for inflation targeting. So, it should be an aspirational word. The word organizations, on the other hand, it contains no aspirational character about it. It's just reality that you make an organization of 1,000 people, it will have its own dynamics. People will be lazy, people will be corrupt, people will try to amass power, people will try to do things that are in their self-interest. And that gets you into the main business of management, that organizations are collections of people responding to incentives and behaving in certain ways, and we should bring a skeptical public choice theory toolkit on understanding how and why organizations behave, where there is no lofty claim that just because you are an organization, you are either good or competent. Just because you are an organization, you are bedeviled by all the problems of all organizations, which is agency problems in government settings, public choice theory, people crave laziness, corruption, power. So, each individual is pursuing her own objective, and the organizational objectives are distinct. And how do you reconcile these problems? So, that's surrounding the word organization. So, we should always be cautious and skeptical and not sign up for language in India which is very lofty and presumes that organizations in India are comparable to those present in advanced economies. Okay, then Vas, maybe a short form for Vasudev, says, how might the languages used in India evolve in the future? I think India is moving in some very interesting directions. In the elite, English has won. English is the lingua franca. You may be from Kashmir, you may be from Kanyakumari. The Indian elite uses English as the lingua franca. Metcalfe's law teaches us that the power of a network grows as proportion to n squared, where n is the number of nodes in the graph. So, as the number of people and the number of organizations that are connected up in the Indian English speaking network grow every day, the power of that network keeps growing. It is the most important language network of the country today. Parents have got the memo and are pushing their kids into learning more and more English. At the street level, English has won. All over India, in many places, you will get by in working class settings in a modicum of English, and so it's become a different kind of lingua franca which is operating at the working class level.
Yeah, I'll give a couple of pointers here, and one is to a great book by Peggy Mohan called Wanderers, Kings and Merchants. I had a good episode with her as well, and also to an episode I did with Vinay Singhal, who founded Stage.in. Now, one of the you often use the phrase a great flattening sound, and there has been a great flattening sound in languages in the sense that over a period of time, people have lamented that dialects are disappearing and there's a homogenization, not just in terms of English as a lingua franca, but in Haryana, for example, people will lose Haryanvi when they go from the village and they'll go to a town, and everything will be in Hindi, for example. Like when I did my episode with Vinay, he grew up in a village in Haryana. He said that there were 2 times in his life he had to try really hard. Once was when he went to his English medium school in the 8th standard, and he didn't know English properly, but he worked hard at it and reached the top of his class. And the next was when he went to a city, I forget which city, probably Delhi, and his problem was with Hindi. And you might think he's in a Haryana village, but it was Haryanvi. And there was that flattening sound where homogenization is happening. But the delightful thing about the episode is that Vinay's venture, stage.in, aims to be a Netflix for Bharat, but not a Netflix for Bharat in terms of creating content in languages like Hindi, Bengali, etc., but in dialects like Haryanvi, Bhojpuri, Maithili, and so on. And what is therefore happening is a move to the other side where long tails are getting empowered, where you can have niche content with 1,000 true fans because every dialect will at least have 1,000 true fans. And, instead of dying out, they can stay alive in this way. So these are two different forces. I don't know how they are going to play out, but I would urge readers to sort of engage with the languages. Whenever someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to start a podcast, for example, I'll say that if your English is at, say, at a level of 100 and your other language is at a level of 80 or whatever, go for that other language even if it's you're not so good in it, because it's untapped and there is so much hunger for knowledge and entertainment in that. So I really hope that our diversity survives and the great flattening sound gradually becomes a mere echo from the past.
Eric Paul says, Amit, what was the original vision of Everything is Everything? How has it evolved through these 50 episodes? What's the developmental process like? How much time and effort and prep go into reading and note taking for each episode?
Yeah, so we are at episode 50, which isn't really much. Like, I remember the Seen and the Unseen evolved enormously through its journey of 380 plus episodes at the time of speaking. And episode 50, it seems like it was nowhere. I mean, I look back and I think, array, that's not representative at all. So I don't know where we'll go from here. But our vision of this show was the same way that you and I sit and we, talk about interesting things. And I find it very stimulating, at least. So I thought that we'll sort of do that in such a way that we can capture some of the conversation and some of the discovery and some of the sort of the multidisciplinary approach where we bring different frames to bear on things. And also, I thought that it is important for the discourse that there is so much there that is shouty and polarized and simplistic. And I wanted the scope to sit down and have deeper conversations, which I know from the Seen and the Unseen there is a large audience for it. People crave this kind of engagement, depth. People crave civil arguments like we often have. And so that was really the idea, where it's not as if we are really presenting things to people, but we are sitting and having a conversation and capturing that in an organic feel. So that is sort of where we are in our journey.
What's the developmental process like? How much time, effort, prep go into reading and note taking for
So
each episode?
I'd say for me, nowhere near as much as the Seen and the Unseen. We talk about stuff that we already have thought about and all of that. When you come up with a subject that you know deeply and I don't, then maybe I'll do some reading on it, and I'll brush up my own reading on a subject that I might know pretty well. But it doesn't take days and days per se. So we'll ideate, and often what happens is that if you're meeting, say, often we'll record 5 episodes over a couple of days, and we might have ideas about, let's talk about this, but they're vague ideas. And when we meet, something will randomly emerge hawa se. Like, I remember we were at dinner one day and you said something about Newton and I said something about Gandhi, and straight away the next morning we recorded and we spoke about Newton and Gandhi and just constructed an episode out of that. So there is a sort of an improvisatory vibe that we leave ourselves open to in that sense.
Apurv Srivastav says, Ajay, the patriarchy, caste, and global warming are also products of spontaneous order. How can we be enthusiastic about freedom and spontaneous order when it gives us such bads also? Okay, so first, we should not be in a utopian mode that anything will make the world perfect. The world will always have problems. So you should not set yourself the benchmark that there will be some paradise. There will be no Ram Rajya. There will always be problems in the world. So everything contains difficulties. Out of the three things you talked about, global warming is actually a simple piece of our toolkit, like I talked about sustainability earlier. There is a market failure. Carbon dioxide is a pollutant and it creates global warming, and you need to use purposive state action in trying to control that. Apart from that, I feel the philosophy, the principle is not that we accept a problem like caste as a given, but rather that it is up to us, it is up to we the people, it is the individuals, it is the society that should wake up and make up its own mind and change, and maybe not change, but it the change should come from the bottom up rather than being imposed from the top. Whatever is imposed from the top, partly it doesn't work too well, and partly it is truly dangerous, because who knows what the values and the culture of the people at the top are.
And my point really is that, first of all, when we use the term spontaneous order, we use it in a descriptive sense, right? That you are right that all these things, patriarchy, caste, which are terrible and amplify the worst demons of our nature, emerge in a sort of spontaneous way. But the way that they are best tackled is also through spontaneous order, right? They are also through society deciding that these are unacceptable. They are also through through the mechanisms of markets, and through the mechanisms of society overall changing its values over a period of time, as has happened over the last couple of centuries. We still have, for example, we still have misogyny and sexism in the world today, but it's a much better place for women than it was 100 years ago. So you have progress that happens like that, and top-down interventions never really work in any context. It has to happen in a bottom-up way, which is why we can't take the lazy approach of saying law banate hai, regulation banate hai, and leave it at that and not think about outcomes, but actually try to bring that ferment from within and say that no, these things are not acceptable, and we have to sort of fight against them.
Apurv Srivastav says to you, Amit, is there more to the term neoliberalism than just a curse word of the left?
It is only a cuss word of the left. I have only heard it used as a pejorative. No one self-identifies with that label. And the thing is, whenever I hear someone using that term, I automatically assume intellectual laziness. It's a convenient narrative that blames the ills of the world on neoliberalism without actually thinking about how the world works. And if you examine a little deeper, you find that and I've had arguments with people where I say that, okay, before I even talk about it, define what it means, and they are unable to even do that in a coherent way. But my problem is, broadly, if it is supposed to be anti-capitalist or against free markets, I'm like, that is completely the wrong way around. All of human progress has happened because of the voluntary action of individuals, because of greater freedom. And if you're against that, and if you're for state coercion, then it's absolutely terrible. So neoliberalism is this bogey term that means absolutely nothing, and I lose respect for people who use that word.
Yeah. Then Vishal says, Amit, why is there intellectual dishonesty in the field of economics? Is it just that the subject is inherently hard to figure out?
I will go back to Land Pritchett. I will go back to Land Pritchett, and this is not something he necessarily said, but something I realized during my episode with him, that he makes this great distinction between national development and kinky development. And national development to him is asking the difficult questions. Our moral imperative is to get rid of poverty. How do we do this? It's a difficult question, it's a muddy question, it's complicated, and also the discourse around it is fraud. And you can choose to ignore it and go for what he calls kinky development, where you tackle much smaller questions at a much smaller level, which have easy answers, which get you career advancement, and which don't make any dent on the problem. Our city is being a classic example of that, and we'll talk about this in a future episode during the beat sessions as we have planned. But I agree that there is great intellectual laziness in any profession, where it is convenient to take simple answers and to do the easy thing, especially if it helps your career, rather than tackle really difficult questions which might involve lifelong journeys.
Then Tor says, Ajay, Milton Friedman said the responsibility of a business is to maximize its profit. Comment. Okay, so I think that the responsibility of a business is to maximize its profit, subject to the problems of market failure. Okay, now in an ideal world, the state is supposed to create the laws and the regulations through which the market failure will not happen. So in an ideal world where the state did a good job of having rules about pollution, my version of this would be the responsibility of a business is to maximize its profit while obeying the rules about pollution emission. But then you find yourself in a place like India where the state malfunctions, where a business has many avenues to fully legitimately do things that impose bads upon others, where there is market failure going on and the business knows it and it is fully compatible with the law and the business goes ahead and does it, and where there are avenues in India to try to influence state policy in more toxic ways. We talked about some of these things in the episode on firms and internationalization. So I do think that it's important in a place like India to be an ethical business. And I define an ethical business as one that is more self-aware and conscious about what it is doing in terms of market failure.
So I have an answer to this also, and my answer to this is absolutely yes. And let me qualify that. One, I had written a column called "Profit is not a dirty word." It isn't. In a competitive marketplace, the only way that you can make a profit is by making somebody else better off. It's a double thank you moment. It's a positive sum game. So Jawaharlal Nehru famously once said to J.R.D. Tata, "Do not speak to me of profit. It is a dirty word." He got that completely wrong. Profit is not a dirty word in a competitive marketplace. You're making someone better off. It is the highest form of philanthropy, right? So that's point number one that I want to make. Point number two is think about how we live our own lives. Like my own moral code for myself is that I should be free to do whatever I want to do as long as I am not infringing on the rights of anyone else. And that caveat extends to companies as well, that as long as a company is not infringing on somebody's rights or making the world worse off, again, John Stuart Mill's harm principle comes to mind. If they're not harming anyone, then why should we object? And one way that companies can often harm others is by colluding with the state, keeping competition out, and so on and so forth. So again, all this is assuming that we have a free and competitive marketplace. In that case, yes, the only way to make profits is to make somebody else better off. Why should that not be the duty of a company? And everything Ajay says regarding market failures and collusion with the state, of course, applies in the same way as it would apply to me, that Ajay and I are free to do whatever we want together with mutual consent, as long as we are not strangling Vaishnav out there. So that's the important thing to remember.
Rohit says, Amit, what will happen to the humans when AI develops greater capabilities and does a much wider range of things?
AI has already developed great capabilities. 30 years ago, you show me GPS, for example. We've had a great episode on maps. Or you show me any of the things I can do with AI, and I would be like, man, this is magic. This is sort of incredible. And what has all this technology done? It's not made us weaker or redundant or anything. It's made us better off. I think AI will help us live better, more purposive lives where we focus on higher order things and we focus on the things that made us happy. Ajay has a sly smile on his face. I know he slightly disagrees, but we had an episode on AI very early on, so you can check that episode out. But I am optimistic in the long run of AI being good for mankind, and I'm not alarmist about it at all. And it's a journey. Right now, we are not there in terms of anywhere near AGI or something, but it's a journey. And overall, the technology is a massive force for good and individual empowerment. And there are flip sides, but it's a huge net positive.
Kifil says, Amit, why is freedom not appreciated as the core value in India?
Because in many ways it is unintuitive. Because we've done an episodes on 5 common fallacies, and a central point we made there is that our brains have evolved in prehistoric times. So we will think in top-down ways. We will think in tribal terms where someone is, controlling the behavior of others. And it is a natural impulse that if there is a particular behavior we disapprove of, many people will say ban it, without thinking about whether that behavior infringes on the rights of anybody at all. So I think, many aspects of freedom are unintuitive. The benefits of freedom are unintuitive. What I just said about, all trades being, a positive sum game, about the double thank you moments, that's unintuitive. We think of the world in zero-sum ways. So again, our episode on fallacies explores some of that. But it's again, part of us is hardwired to think in ways that don't actually correspond with the reality of the complex world we live in.
Sachin says, Ajay, can Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies do something fundamental for increasing freedom in India? Okay, so I think that there is a great damage that was done to freedom in India by the exchange controls that were put up by the British during Second World War and exacerbated in the following period. So the people responded by coming up with many ways through which the people are able to break past these restrictions. One of them is misinvoicing on trade. So when you send goods out worth 100, they are invoiced as 90 and 10 rupees goes into a foreign bank account. Okay, and the reverse of that on the incoming side. I have a co-authored paper on this, and there are very large numbers going on through which the Indian business community has been able to bypass these exchange control restrictions and achieve de facto convertibility. So I think that cryptocurrencies becomes one more vehicle for doing that. So I think of it as one more tool, not something fundamental. Vaishnav Vyas, I wonder who that is,
I wonder
says,
who that is. He's sitting
yeah.
right there.
Amit, what's the biggest mistake that a parent can make in a child's formative years?
The biggest mistake, and I've spoken about this before, is to compliment them for their attributes and not for their effort. You know, there's a great paper on this by Muller and Dweck, which I spoke about in our productivity episode, which is where they took two groups of kids, and one group, and they were given tasks, and one group was praised on attributes like, oh, you're so intelligent, you solved that problem, and the other group was praised on in terms of effort, that, oh, you tried so hard, good, you kept at it. And you know what they found was, when they did subsequent tests on those two groups of kids, aloo pyaj is being sold down. Do you want some aloo pyaj? Aloo has a lot of carbs, pyaj not so much. That when they did subsequent tests on those groups of kids, they found that the ones who were praised on attributes actually tried less hard, and they eventually slipped, and they would even cheat because they felt entitled, now that they've been told they're intelligent, to achieve something. Whereas the trials just kept trying because that's what they were praised for. So I think if you're a parent, it is super, super, super important that you bring your kids up to focus on effort, to focus on attitude, to focus on trying hard, rather than fill them with thoughts that might make them feel entitled later of how intelligent they are, how smart they are. And I say this with a lot of feeling, because I think that, you know, this might have happened to me, where when I look back on a younger me, I was sort of full of myself in different unpleasant ways, and also didn't try hard enough. And I simply wish that I had never thought I was intelligent, and I had only assumed that I must try harder and harder and harder. So it's just such an important lesson, I think.
Yeah. And Vaishnav asks me, he says, Ajay, what are three behaviors in the world that we see around us today which should be denormalized? Okay, so number one is easy, it is noise. I think we are reckless about noise pollution. We have motorcycles that make noise, we have construction projects that make noise, we have idiots walking around with speaker phones and Bluetooth, and just the reckless infliction of noise. There is a marriage party for 1 kilometer, you can hear it. The pro tip in the rental market is look for any religious structure and keep far away from it. Like, never rent a house that is close to a temple or a mosque, because they'll just make so much noise. So these basic things, I feel you need to understand that noise is something that is just not on. Then going one step beyond that, I think a great crisis of the world is celebrity culture. That we've created a world in which we revere celebrity, and a celebrity is somebody who's famous for being famous, and there's just something empty about it, and it's a bubble, and it's all nonsense, and it is all wrong, but it keeps going, the world keeps going as in that mode. And that leads me to the third idea, which is the casual and contemptuous disregard for knowledge and expertise that has become the modern populism of the world. That 50 years ago, most people did not have knowledge, but they were more respectful of knowledge. And it is a truly damaging thing about the modern world, that today the person without the knowledge, armed with the WhatsApp, is cocky and says, I look down on the people who have knowledge.
And if I may add to it, one that and he meant this question for both of us, I can see him looking at me. And, you know, I'll just add one point to this, not three, which is that we must make decisions about the virtue of others based on their actions and not on their words. Too often I find that it's so facile that social media is full of virtue signaling, and the worst, most empty, vacuous people will say things and be praised for it, while in their real lives they're completely different. I often say those who project the most virtue possess the least. And you know, and I've had many episodes with, you know, different feminists who worked in the field for 20, 30 years, and they will bemoan that these younger people will just come and do sloganeering on Twitter, and they'll be like gaining status within their tribes from that, and actually no work or no understanding of the real world even. And I think we should, you know, judge people based on their actions. You should, before being highly regarded as someone who is, you know, a good, virtuous person, you should actually have done something, not just said shit.
Anshul Khare says, Ajay, what are some big ideas which you once held dear where you have now shifted positions? On the world of computer technology and Moore's law and the internet, I used to be far more optimistic that the pervasive access to knowledge and information for the people would make the world better. Okay, my positions have shifted. I think there's a beautiful line about power that when you achieve power, you become more of what you really are. And I think that's the way to think about the internet and the computer revolution.
So
The
when
internet.
since power corrupts, then that means we are all inherently
Yeah.
corrupt.
So we've been given more power in terms of CPUs and the internet. And it hasn't necessarily made us better. It just made us more of what we are. And if there was, good values and good character inside you, then the CPUs and the internet have taken that vector and added magnitude to that vector. But if the vector was in the wrong direction in the first place, the CPUs and the internet have added magnitude to that vector and made it more toxic. So I used to be far more optimistic that Moore's law and Unix and the internet was going to make the world better. Today, I think that in the hands of some people, it makes them better. In the hands of others, it makes them worse. Okay. Now we go to a group of questions about shirts. Okay, so Mayank says, Ajay, tell us about shirts. Do you buy them? Are they gifts? Arpita says, Ajay, your shirts are great. How do you choose shirts for use in normal life and for the show? Eric Paul says, your shirts are great. Tell us where to get them. Okay, and I used to have a uniform which was basically stolen from the look of Kirit Parikh and Shekhar Shah, which was basically a Khadi Emporium white or off-white shirt every single day of the year. That's how I used to normally be. Half sleeves, because India is too hot for full sleeves. So over the years I managed to gain confidence to stop wearing full sleeve shirts. I think I've never worn a suit and a tie in India in my whole life in India. I have worn a suit and a tie abroad, but in India I've never worn a suit and a tie. But in India I have retreated from full sleeve shirts to half sleeve shirts. And my uniform used to be just a simple plain white or off-white or some, Khadi Emporium shirts was my recipe. And as I said, this was stolen from Kirit Parikh and Shekhar Shah. Then many, many years later, I stumbled on printed shirts. I think this was at Udaipur. And I bought a few and it was an interesting, different look. And then around that time, we got going on EIE. So I thought, hey, why not experiment? And I put some of those shirts in the show. And then it looks good. And then I bought some more and I got gifted many shirts. Most of my shirts are actually gifts. And some of the sources are, so there is Arvind retail outlet. There's an Arvind retail outlet in Ahmedabad. A couple of my shirts are from there. Some things are mail order. I can give people a list of what are the sources. And several of the shirts are the remarkable printed silk shirts from Indian Colors, where contemporary Indian art is printed on shirts. Kaustubh Agashe says, Amit, do you waste time? How do you define time wasted? How disciplined are you?
Good questions. I wasted a lot of time. I've lamented about my lack of discipline earlier in this episode. But I would also say that, I think there's a John Lennon quote to the effect of no time is wasted unless you feel it is wasted, right? So I think that we can't always get on a productivity treadmill. Earlier you said disengage from mass culture. I would say, sometimes mass culture is fine. You have to recognize that sometimes your brain and your body need to unwind and you should let them unwind. And sometimes you need to work and you should find the discipline to be able to work. And there is a balance to be maintained. I think there are 24 hours in a day. If you're sleeping for 8 hours, chilling for 8 hours, trying to work for 8 hours, I think that's fine by and large. Take a couple of days off when you need to. Take a week off if you're lucky enough to be able to do so. So as far as time wasting is concerned, I think when you want to work and you're wasting it with shallow dopamine inducing activities like social media or bullet games of chess, that is a problem. But if you're reading a nice book, watching an interesting web series, even if it is mass culture, I think it's fine. You need to sometimes, chill with your brain, relax.
And Kaustubh Agashe says, Ajay, it is one thing to think about optimal paths for India as of today. Not all of this correctly ports to 1947. Was some of the developmental state stuff done by Nehru appropriate given those initial conditions? It's a great question and we should debate. I really shake my head and disagree. I disagree with all the developmental state stuff. If you could go back in a time machine, I can't help thinking that what was best in 1947 was just do basic public goods. That if the Indian state had done 10% of GDP, build rule of law, build the judiciary, build a tax system with rule of law, and do basics and learn how to do basics, then it would have created conditions for the flowering of private
And we have a
persons.
great episode on this where, the title is about freedom, and it is, but it's really India's economic history over centuries, in fact. So check that out.
Then Immaraju Giridhar says, Amit, tell us about your disagreements with Ajay.
My disagreements with Ajay, we've never fought, have we? We've never come close to a point where I say, I don't want to be friends with this guy anymore. So I don't think we have disagreements of that sort. I think at an instinctive level, I am even more towards freedom than Ajay is. And I feel that he uses the word market failure a lot. And there's a lot of nuance there in a sense of saying that intervention should only be done by the state when there is market failure, and that's the thing. But I think people can often misunderstand that and think that, oh, market failure to har jagah hai, and actually no, market failures are incredibly rare. Government failure is ubiquitous. It is written into the incentives of the state, as we spoke about in our public choice episode. So I have a feeling that if we dig down deep enough into certain areas, you might find that Ajay is a little more favor of government regulation than I am. But broadly, I think in terms of values, Ajay and I are completely aligned in terms of values, in terms of the importance of freedom and autonomy and consent. We are completely aligned. I think life has taught us similar hard lessons, though we've never spoken overtly about them. So our personal philosophies are also sort of similar, and I'm sure we'll agree and keep fighting about things like AI. I am more optimistic than he is, which is great, which is how we kind of can learn from each other. But otherwise, yeah, this is a problem. Like I have a friend, Deepak VS, whom you know, with whom I did a great episode of The Seen and the Unseen. And every time we meet, he'll keep asking me questions. What do you think about this? Because he wants to find something on which he disagrees with me. And even though I'm so, libertarian and this and that, there's very little that we can find, which I think is okay. But broadly, we are not with each other because we want to be with like-minded people. Many of my friends, I have violent disagreements with them over this or that. But I think friendship is friendship, and views matching is another thing. And our values match, and that's great. And I think that's a great basis. What do you think?
For example, today we spoke about my shifting positions around technology, that there is more of a dark side than I used to. And, we constantly have differences of opinion about that. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine.
I agree about the dark side, but I think it's a net positive.
Yeah.
But
And Imaraju Giridhar says, Ajay, it's high time you write more books. What are you thinking? So, Kilkar and Shah's second edition was late 2022. And by the second edition, that book is truly out of my mind. So, it took me a total of 4 years to get to that. But that book is, I think, finished in my mind. I wish you could fix the typos and fix the grammar. But for the rest, I feel in terms of ideas, I'm out of that. I have a grand plan of a whole group of books. In the next few years, I hope to find time to do them. The full story I hope to put together is going to play out in about 20 years. So there's a group of books that I want to do in about 20 years. Shakil says, Ajay, how come you follow nobody on Twitter? Okay, because I'm just a skeptic on social media. I want to see people at their best. So I don't want to see the off-the-cuff response of a person. I don't want to see a person being dealt with by nasty people and being put in a position of ugliness. I want to admire and respect great people at their best, which is in long form writing, and I don't want to see quick off the cuff responses. I recognize many people use Twitter, so I post URLs of my writings on Twitter. I look at the account maybe once every day or once every 2 days to just be aware of what's going on there, but for the rest, I'm not a Twitter user. Bharat Bhasin says, Ajay, do you regret having not stayed back in the United States? Do you regret coming back to India? Will the exodus of the rich from India continue? For me personally, I thought it was one of the best decisions of my whole life. that I moved back to India. I found purpose, I found passion. I'm very pleased and happy at what I did. In America, I would have been doing second order stuff. In India, I got to do first order stuff. So being in the early stages of a developing country is a treat. You get to think about the big grand questions, and I got to be a bit player in very, very big and important stories in the journey of this country, and I'm thrilled to bits for having got that opportunity. Will the exodus of the rich from India continue? I fear it will. There is a mean and populist streak in the Indian state. There was a period from 1991 to 2011 when it was different, when the best and brightest were making India their home and were building a life and a family and organizations in India. Today, the Indian state is a far more dangerous and anti-elite character. And so, yeah, I expect that there will be a constant departure by the elite with great adverse consequences for the country. Because finally, every country needs to hang on to its elite. All the wealth and all the creation is done by the elite. Pranav says, Amit, tell us how to approach starting a family, building community, living a meaningful life.
Think deeply about any of those things before you do them. I think what often happens is that we fall prey to what is known as mimetic desire. A phrase used by the philosopher René Girard. Luke Burgess wrote a great book called Wanting about it. I've had an episode with Luke as well. And and mimetic desires is when you want something because it's a done thing. Other people want it. कि उसके पास Mercedes है, मुझे भी चाहिए. उसके पास ये है, मुझे भी चाहिए. And I think some of the deeper mimetic desires are things like, get married, have kids, blah, blah, blah. So I think before you opt for, decisions like that, think deeply about what they imply. Is it what you really want? Understand the trade-offs that they involve. As far as community is concerned, I think that there is great comfort in being part of a community, but you want it to be a community of choice and not of circumstance. Like, one of the reasons that I feel I'm lucky to be born at the time I was and not earlier is that I could break away from communities of circumstance and form communities of choice based on values and interests. And you want to do that as much as you can. But one mistake that I have possibly made through my life, concerns a phrase which I learned from Sugata Srinivasaraju in an episode I did with him, Rooted Cosmopolitanism, where I think that I am cosmopolitan, but I'm not rooted enough. And that is a lament that I have. So I would urge everyone who is reading this to, yes, be cosmopolitan and globalized in their outlooks, but also stay rooted in the cultures that they come from. Not everything about that is toxic or bad. There is value to be had there. And finally, as far as the word community is concerned, I would say that, look, in the end, the things that we have or even the places that we've gone to don't matter. What matters is the people we collect. So collect good people and you will be fine.
And Pranav says to me, Ajay, how come you did not take the path of making money in finance? How should a young person find meaning? I'll only answer the second part because the first one will flow from that. I think we did a answer to this question in the hiking episode. Okay, gentle reader, you may think that you're not interested in hiking, but there is stuff in the hiking episode that is just for you. So we were saying that there are two things that we've got to watch for and not do. One is doing things in a competitive way, that don't do things because you want to outsmart the others in your school or the others who are your neighbors, and just like stop thinking in a competitive way. And the second is stop this business of life as a performance, that I'm doing things because I can put them up on social media, or I will burnish my resume and then I will look good in the eyes of others. Okay, so if you can get these two things out of your mind, the rest is all good, which is then what is left? You will do the stuff that you value. You will only do the stuff that you value. You will not do stuff that is just a mistake and a distraction, and that you're doing because you have competitive energy, or you're doing because it's a performance which you're putting on to show other people. Saurabh Bhide says, Amit, which of the Satu conversations had the biggest impact on your thinking and your life?
You mean the seen and the unseen? Rather than pick any particular conversations, I would say shifting the mode of conversations had a huge impact, in the sense that the journey of the seen and the unseen was that it began as relatively shallow looks at subject, shallow in the sense tackling only a subject and not going deeper into a field. From that, it evolved to deep dives into subjects and deep dives into fields. And from that, and those were 3 hours, 4 hours. And from there, it evolved into deep dives into people, which on average are 3, 4 hours, but have gone as long as 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours. Those are quite common. And I feel that that changed me a bit. I've written an essay about it, which we'll link in the show notes, called A Meditation on Form. And that changed me because I became a better listener. That when you are doing like a 5 hour conversation is not 5 times a 1 hour conversation. It is a different beast entirely. But the quality of your listening goes up. You listen far more to understand and not to respond. You take your ego out of it. And I found great delight in getting into the lives of people, understanding them better as human beings. ठीक है, ideas के बारे में बात करेंगे. That's not, one does a lot of that. But just getting to know someone as a human being, what shaped them, getting to know their past, getting to know their dreams and their fears and all of that. I just find that really rewarding. I feel in some ways which and one can't articulate precise points when it happens, but perhaps I've become more humble and more open and, gained a little more thera from that. So rather than point to particular episodes, I will say that that's a big deal. If you want to start somewhere with the seen and the unseen, the 8 hour episode with Jerry Pinto is an entry point for many people. Ditto with Shanta Gokhale ji. To understand the Indian state, there's the 8 hour episode with K.P. Krishnan. I've had great episodes on writing with the likes of Amitabh Kumar, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed is the many episodes I've done with women. People often say that the episodes I've done with women are qualitatively at a different level from men because women just talk differently, open up more, and there are remarkable episodes I've done with Mrinal Pandeyji, Ira Pandeyji, Shrena Bhattacharya, Mukulika Banerjee, Kavita Krishnan, and so many others. So it's impossible for me to pick out any because, as I might have mentioned in the past, my approach to my work is that I'll do an episode and then I'll do it with full intensity, but then I'll completely disconnect and go on to the next episode that I'm doing. So in that sense, there are no episodes I go back to ever, unless I need to for research purposes. I've forgotten something I said there, but otherwise, no. But I think just that whole sort of the rhythm of engaging in conversation and the rhythm of life that is associated with it, that is slower and more deliberate, is something that I've gained.
Mayank says, Amit, how did you meet Ajay?
I think we met through mutual friends. We were part of an email group where we would discuss interesting things many years ago, so maybe 15, 16 years ago. And for a long time, we didn't really become friends. I think we became friends 4, 5 years ago. I mean, I don't know. But what's your memory of this?
Yeah, I think we used to be in those discussion groups organized by Bhargavi. And then you invited me on the show for the seen and the unseen on finance. And so then it just kept growing. We kept talking more and more. Advaya says, Ajay, you seem like a rational guy. Have you become irrational and emotional sometimes? Sometimes, yeah, I assure you. I think that I'm a bit calm. So things happen and I don't get rattled easily. And I think that is related to these issues about not being competitive and not putting on a performance. So, life has ups and downs. And I also try to have a recipe for crisis management, which is that the bigger the crisis, the more calm and collected you need to be so that you're able to summon your mind. So I think this is a combination. So yes, I am plenty irrational and emotional.
At this point, I have a story about Ajay for you, which I have heard from him. And I don't think he said this during his hiking episode, but basically, how he broke his leg was he went hiking, and for the first time in 30 years or whatever, he had an accident. And basically, he kind of fell off the edge of what appears to be a mountain, and he was kind of hanging on like this. And his dear friend Ayush grabbed his hand and held on to it for a while. And Ajay was in that moment in such panic that he was sweating all over, and his body was covered with sweat. So for about 30 seconds, Ayush just held him silently. And Ayush, from what little I know of him, is also stoic and rational, and all of those things just helped him silently. Not a word passed between the two. And then Ajay looked up at Ayush and said, "Let's solve this." So that's Ajay Shah for you.
Okay. Then Shekhar S says, Ajay, do you feel awkward or uncomfortable with the fact that not a lot of great knowledge was created in the past by persons living in the Indian subcontinent? Is greatness in our parents and ancestors either necessary or sufficient for us to feel good about ourselves. So speaking for me, I don't feel that problem at all. I love Ramanujan as much as I love Einstein, as much as I love Gandhiji, as much as I love Nehru. I mean, I'm not fussed about that. I see the glory of the human journey. For me, it's the ascent of man. It's not defined by ethnicity or a line on a map or anything like that. So
And the
no,
ascent of man, of course, is a phrase picked up from Bronislavski's book. We should say the
Bronowski,
ascent of humans.
Bronowski, yeah.
Bronovsky, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and also I want to argue with the premise that our ancestors or within the Indian subcontinent have not created anything of value. What's with that? I mean, everything around us that is in our culture has kind of also come from there, and it is amazing and beautiful. And yeah.
Okay, then Srinivas says, Amit, why do you put in the immense effort that is required to make seen and the unseen and everything is everything?
So when I started, I did not visualize them as I will aim towards making it this particular thing and I will put an effort towards that. They kind of evolved organically over a period of time. As the seen and the unseen evolved into its longer form, I kind of fell in love with it. I also felt that there is a higher purpose there, that when the discourse is so polluted outside, that I can have meaningful, deeper conversations that travel across time, not just across space. You can listen to these conversations 30 years later, they'll make sense. And I realized that people value them so much. And that gave me an added sense of responsibility. And it's really a labor of love. Like at this precise moment, I don't even know if in money terms I'm net positive from these shows. I don't think I am. But, in indirect ways, as I described earlier, they sort of keep me going financially anyway. But the larger thing is that I love doing this and I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I love. And there's a lot of value in that. It is not all I love. It's a very small part. So I'm deeply frustrated and angry with myself for not being able to do a lot else of what I want to do, especially when it comes to writing. But I'll do that with time. But meanwhile, I love these two. These mean a big deal to me and I will not stop.
Srinivas says, who are songwriters beyond Springsteen that you admire?
There's a lot, and my tastes have gotten wider with time. Obviously there's Dylan, Lou Reed. Joni Mitchell is absolutely incredible. Joni Mitchell's album Blue is one of my favorites. For Lou Reed, you could start with New York, which is a masterpiece. Everything by Dylan, but Blood on the Tracks, Time Out of Mind are my two specific favorites in different phases of his life. So it's pretty interesting. Otherwise, I listen to a lot of what would have many years ago been called alternative, but is now sort of splintered into many different subgenres, as people would say. And Van Morrison is a recurring favorite. Astral Weeks is a great album which you should check out. Ditto Moondance. So a lot, but I mean, there's nothing special about my taste. So just because why does
And Srinivas says to me, Ajay, how do you prepare for each EIE episode? For example, the maps episode. So I don't really read for the recordings, meaning whatever is happening in the show is off the shelf knowledge. But we do prepare in the sense of establishing a linear flow of in what order will the pieces appear. And we choose the URLs of the show notes ahead of time. So as an example, when I was telling the story of the Tatsinskaya airfield, so it was very much a story I've known for 25 years. But prior to reading the show, I did go back and just look up the facts again because I will have forgotten how many kilometers is the Tatsinskaya airfield from Stalingrad. And so like there'll be little details that I needed to look up to refresh them. But the story is just like part of my life raw material.
And as an aside, what often happens is it's a classic example of an episode which is led by Ajay. So he's doing the whole thing, and I'm sort of the interlocutor in that particular episode. And sometimes it's reverse, sometimes it's the other way around. So I thought, okay, how do I add value to this? Let's do a quiz. And I got those 5 interesting fictional maps to show him and say, okay, can you identify what this is? So when he's leading an episode on which he is an expert, I'll make sure there's no need for me to show off my gyan. So I'm just sort of playing the enabler in that sense and adding value in whatever little ways I can, and vice versa, as in the poker episode, for example.
So for example, in the maps episode, I knew many pieces. I'm a junkie, I've loved maps all my life. I knew many pieces about what is wrong with the survey of India from a public policy point of view, the glory of Google Maps and Google Earth, the emergence of OSM. So I knew many of those pieces. So it was more a matter of putting them together in a linear flow that was interesting and adds up to an episode of Everything is Everything. Okay, then Jay, or is it Zai? Jay says, Amit, what is your aim, your goal?
How you, like Annie Dillard said, how you spend your days, of course, is how you spend your life. So my aim these days is just to spend my days in a good way. But I'll elaborate upon that because recently I thought of something as an interesting frame to adopt, which I hadn't earlier. Now, in our declutter episode, I've spoken about how I've changed my approach towards a lot of things to be oriented more towards processes and goals, not have grand goals, take happiness in the small things. But I was also recently thinking about aging and how one thinks about it. And I thought that rather than have a long time horizon and say, oh, another 10 years I'll decline and decline will start and etc., a better way to think about it is that at the end of every year, and this is now going to be the story for the rest of my life until one can't do anything about it. At the end of every year, I want to end that year fitter than I was a year before and having achieved more while not having lost anything. So in the context of this year, it would mean losing a certain amount of weight, achieving certain fitness, metrics which depend upon regular working out, good diet, and also on being productive in terms of the writing I want to do, but without giving up the seen and the unseen and everything is everything. Keep those going, do more work. And I think if year on year you can be at least as healthy as you were at the start of the year and, have be able to say this year I produced XYZ, I think that's kind of fine. So that's how I look at it. Would you agree? Is that what you do?
So I don't agree with the idea that I will be fitter year on year, because aging is happening with probability 1. So I feel that's an unreasonable benchmark and you're setting yourself up for sadness. While you were speaking, a phrase I was thinking about was, we've discussed this many times before. Let's start from the phrase, I want to be the best Amit Varma I can be.
You want
I
to be
think,
the best Amit Varma
no,
you
I
can
mean,
be.
I'm just paraphrasing for you. So then we should imagine we enlarge that to say, I want to be the best Amit Varma I can be at time T. So, we are where we are, meaning there's no point in raging against the limitations and the constraints.
No,
We
I
are
think
where
when
we
I
are.
say fitter and all that, I mean because I'm starting from a really low base. I was deeply unfit at the start of this year and even now. So,
Okay. And Jay or Zai says, how to you, Amit, how can I become more alive without becoming crazy?
immerse yourself in non-shallow activities, deep activities, read a lot, watch good cinema, listen to good music, listen to stuff that you like. Don't force yourself to do any of these. Force yourself to sit down with a book, but then don't force yourself to read a book you're not enjoying. But I think we waste years and decades cumulatively just by swiping, scrolling, or even the real world equivalent of that. And we don't want to sort of do that. And the joy of immersing yourself in something that's deep and meaningful can, brings a lot of joy, I think.
And Jay says to me, Ajay, what is your purpose? What is your objective in life? And I am a child of the 20th century. I endlessly see that magnificent vista of glory and horror. And I recognize that in the world, and I have never lost sight of both the good and the bad. I know that social and political catastrophe is always possible and that it is beyond my pay grade. And so I can't control it, and then you have to distance yourself from it. Otherwise, you'll become crazy. So what you can do is, what you can control is what you can do with your life. And my definition of the meaning and purpose of my life is, I want to build knowledge and I want to build community. And that is something that I can control, and in my own small way. If you can write 5 books and 10 papers and be a part of a community of 20 people, it's great. That is life satisfaction for me. Okay, then Rupesh Chavan says, Amit, when was the last time you cried and how do you deal with sadness in your life?
The last time I cried was probably when I saw a movie. I tear up really easily. So must be when I saw a movie or somebody's telling me a story. And the thing is, A, I tear up easily, and B, I tear up even when I'm not sad. It's not sadness that does it. Like I could read a beautiful sentence by a writer and be like, oh, what a lovely sentence, regardless of the content of it. Just at such elegance and tears come to my eyes. So I'm kind of a softie that way. As far as real crying and sadness and grief and all of that, I don't think that's something that one can really talk about on a YouTube show. But yeah, crying is healthy. You should
So
cry.
I have
Cry as much as you want. Don't make people cry, gentle listeners.
I have an experiment to offer you. We will make you a master of computer programming. Okay, and then you will be sitting and staring at the screen of a beautiful algorithm. And will tears come to your eyes at the perfection and the beauty of the algorithm?
Tears are coming to my eyes thinking of the amount of brute coercion that would be required to make me a master of computer programming. If I get there myself, I'm sure algorithms will make me tear up as well.
Yeah, I do think so. Okay, Rupesh Chavan similarly says to me, Ajay, a genie gives you one boon to fix India. What would you choose? Okay, so like you're giving me no limits, right? It's a genie, a really super powerful genie. Laws of physics don't apply. Yes, and I won't cheat. I'll stick to only one. Basically, I feel that we just got very, very unlucky in the great freedom movement generation, where I think 1947 was an unlucky year. 1927 to 1947 was that formative period. It was a time where all over the world freedom did badly and the big state did well. And in the First World War and the Second World War, war economies just became complete state mobilization. So I just think that there was a whole thuggish state domination character to that generation. And the same people would have done so much better if their philosophy was better. Or if you're going to hold all the dates and the events intact, what I would like to go do is take a time machine with a bag of books and get it to Nehru and Gandhiji and
You're not going to
Rajgopalachari
read.
and so on. No, they were
The
heavy,
Road to
intensive
Serfdom was
readers.
published 5 years
So
before.
you have to see that in that context, if you gave them like 10 books. So for example, the kind of difference that Seeing Like a State made to me in chipping away at my technological high modernism, that's what a book can do. And those were intellectuals, they were not normal
I
people.
feel that in your case you were receptive to the book because you had been in the belly of the beast and it came to you at the right time, like you pointed out. That's also important.
Yeah.
And I don't know if going through the experiences they did for all those decades, books necessarily would have made a difference. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice wish to
It's
have.
the best thing you can ask for is
Yeah.
I want to send a bag of books in a time machine to, Nehru and Gandhiji and 10 others. Okay. Aditi Mascarenhas says, Amit, most people, most young people are overloaded with possibilities and they end up doing nothing. How does one pick up a few things, put energy, and get on the journey to knowledge? Is a journey of knowledge even feasible for most of us?
That's a great and difficult question. One, I think that you don't have to specialize in knowledge. Like, in a sense, you and I specialize in knowledge. It is literally our profession also. You don't have to specialize in knowledge to live a life of knowledge. You should be reading all the time. You should be, and not just knowledge, art. You should be immersing yourself in good cinema, good music all the time. So I don't think that requires you to be professionals or devote your entire life to it. And the other part of it is that, yeah, it is a danger. Like, even for me, the years, if not decades, have slipped away when I haven't really done any of the substantive things I wanted to do. Like, I want to do A, B, C, I end up doing sweet fuck all. And obviously that's a worry. And I think what I wish I had done back then in the past is just pick one, man. Stop daydreaming. Pick one, immerse yourself in it, love the doing of it. Don't feel bad about what the other things that you gave up to do that. Pick one somehow. Again, I think I've said this before on the show. I was moved by Steve Jobs' advice to Jonathan Ive that in the 1990s when they first met, that learn to say things to know that learn to say learn to say no to things that you love. It's easy to say no to things that you don't want to do, but you might love a bunch of things, not possible to do them all together, and you get enraptured by the thought of doing all of those and you end up doing none of them. Pick one thing, be dedicated, and I think that there is a joy in that dedication also. There is a joy in just sitting down and doing it and loving the process, and and eventually flow will come. Eventually you will marvel at what you have created, but you have to have the willpower to just begin.
I want to add to that. I feel one of the best things that people can do is to apprentice with a good master. So learning the craft through apprenticeship works well. And when you're connected to the passions of the master, it also generates energy that keeps you going. So I think finding a good master is a great thing. And I mean, not in a credentialism sense, but in the sense of, the cool, passionate people who are going at life in a good way.
As
And
Richard Bach once said, what a caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls a butterfly.
And Aditi asks me, she says, Ajay, shall we build a hike for EIE people? Let's walk and let's talk under the stars. And I say, great idea, let's do it. Send me mail and let's build something.
Let's do it. Yeah, it's a good idea, no? 25 people walk under the stars.
We'll figure.
10 p. 25 too much. Anyway, I guess Aditi's got herself up the queue.
Okay, that was it. One more episode done. Amit, I'm starving. Let's go get lunch.
Wait, hey, we've forgotten something, Ajay.
Whoops.
We forgot to say goodbye to the gentle listeners. So thank you for sending us all these questions, and we'll do more of these maybe every 30, 40, 50 episodes or whatever. I think one of the things that I learned from podcasting and that I love about this show as well is that this is not projection, that we are projecting ourselves out to you, we are presenting you content from on high. It's, we're having a conversation with each other, but also in a sense with you. We love reading the YouTube comments, and we love the sense of community that's building up. We've had suggestions, why don't you try to formalize it with a Discord group or whatever. We are thinking about that stuff seriously, so we really value and cherish that. So this is not just in a vacuum, two people talking to each other, but we appreciate the fact that there is that engagement and you care, and that gives us a responsibility as well. So yeah, thank you for that. Should we go for lunch?